Is it possible that Israel both is being discriminate in its targeting of Hamas, but indiscriminate when it comes to the consequence and civilian life?
Well, I don't necessarily think that's the case. This is always a challenge that the targeteers and the commanders have to go through. How do you balance the necessity to be as precise as possible, but at the same time, perhaps missing an important target? It's the notion of military necessity versus collateral damage. Happens in every war. We go through that same analysis. We're accused of that same thing. There is no such thing as a bloodless war, and unfortunately, civilians get brought into this.
So is the White House, this administration, asking for the impossible, General? Is it possible for Israel to eliminate Hamas without heavy civilian casualties?
Well, Hamas is going out of their way to ensure that their best defense is by surrounding themselves by civilians for this very reason.
Yeah.
So I think we really ought to be asking Hamas, why is it that they surround themselves by civilians instead of fighting a war?
Sounds like that's not possible then. As civilians move, Hamas follows. We know they've tunneled underneath hospitals and apartment buildings. It's not possible to separate the two. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not impossible. It's just unreasonable for either an expectation that civilians will not be caught up in this kind of war where they are intentionally being used by the enemies of Israel to protect themselves.
Yeah, and we heard Admiral John Kirby addressing this idea, especially what Joe was just referencing, the tunneling. He discussed the difficulty containing that tunnel system as Israel reportedly is considering flooding them with seawater. Just take a listen, if you will, General.
They deliberately tunnel under civilian infrastructure to allow for the movement of their fighters and for storing equipment and things. That adds an extra burden on the Israelis. And I would just say, again, without confirming these reports about flooding, that, as we've said before, we recognize their right and responsibility to go after Hamas, which is posing a particularly tactically difficult problem for them.
Tactically difficult, as he says. What stands out to me, though, General, is he said they haven't necessarily confirmed those reports, which raises the question of the dialogue taking place between Israel and the U.S. and really how can the U.S. can be exercising leverage over the decisions of Israel, or how much Israel is really taking U.S. considerations into account.
Well, I think Netanyahu listens carefully. He listens politely, but I think at the end of the day, he feels his responsibility is to the people of Israel only. And he believes that he needs to answer to the people of Israel before he answers to the President of the United States.
I'd like to ask you about the situation in Ukraine as well, General. The president of Ukraine was in Washington just yesterday making an ask for funding. He left empty-handed. You've commented to us before that winter, in fact, might be on Ukraine's side because it slows fighting, and it might be a time for regrouping when we might not have money immediately available. President Zelenskyy was singing a very different tune yesterday. What do you see happening without more money and material coming from the U.S. in the beginning months of next year? Could Ukraine lose this war?
If Ukraine loses the war, it will not be because of a delay in the money that's coming in. The president announced the $75 million package yesterday with a lot of ammunition that is needed. But I am concerned that time right now is more important than more ammunition and money for President Zelenskyy. Time being the great equalizer in this, because right now President Putin says he can wait out the Western alliance and possibly even be negotiating with President Trump in 18 months. So, in fact, what President Zelenskyy is saying is that I need as much as I can now because I don't have the time to fight. But having said all of that, at the end of the day, whether the money comes in 1 month or 2 months is pretty much irrelevant because, as you noted, the winter is here and they're not going to be doing a lot of fighting during the winter.
Well, General, it may not just be a question of when the money comes, but if it comes at all, because there are things that members of Congress are asking for in return, one of them being a plan. This is something that Speaker Mike Johnson was talking about yesterday. You've been involved in active conflict. How difficult is it in a scenario like this one to actually put forward a plan about how to win? Is that even possible, sir?
No, that's the most difficult question you can ask President Zelenskyy right now. The reports came out a few weeks ago, pretty detailed, about the disagreement between the American view of how to win this war and the Ukrainian view at a tactical level. But I don't necessarily think that we want to get ourselves into the view where we're now starting to tell Ukrainian units how to fight, where to fight, and when to fight. So I think this may be just some clarity that Speaker Johnson is looking for, but I don't think the Ukrainians want to subcontract their battle plans to the United States, and I don't think we want to do it for them.